David Lombardi, The Athletic, 49ers camp on a busy 49er news day. David, what's going on? Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
We're doing fine. I want you to maybe dispel a couple of things that are going out there based on the Christian McCaffrey deal. The answer might be nothing, but when you see a deal like this, what does it mean for Brandon Aiyuk?
Doesn't mean anything for Brandon Aiyuk. The Brandon Aiyuk deal is happening in the receiver market. The receiver market is what might actually slow it down because we saw such an outlier with Justin Jefferson's contract that it's kind of, to be honest, I think it's confused a lot of the league. You might even be able to compare it to the Deshaun Watson contract a couple of years ago when the Browns gave him that fully guaranteed deal. It was unprecedented, and then a lot of people at the time said, well, okay, now here come all the fully guaranteed deals for quarterbacks, and that never happened. The rest of the league never followed suit, so that remained an outlier. And this Justin Jefferson contract is 70% larger in terms of fully guaranteed money than anything that had happened before it at the receiver position. It's a good chance that the league is going to view it as an outlier again. And the first teams to really put to the test regarding that will be the 49ers because they're negotiating with Brandon Aiyuk, and the Cowboys because they're negotiating with CeeDee Lamb. Maybe the Bengals, too, with Jamar Chase. But anyway, that's the main focus point for the Brandon Aiyuk deal. Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers have had enough space to execute moves before this deal, after this deal. I mean, they actually opened up short-term salary cap space with the Christian McCaffrey contract. The gist of this one is he had $24 million scheduled to come to him over the next 2 seasons. But that money was not guaranteed. And as we know, Christian McCaffrey is one of the best players in the NFL. He wanted some more security. The 49ers said, okay, we'll give you some more security. And the great thing is, if we turn this $24 million into a guarantee, we could actually stretch it out into future years because it prorates against the cap if it's a signing bonus or an option bonus. So the 49ers won, too. Christian McCaffrey won, and that his contract now becomes guaranteed, the $24 million of it. The 49ers won by virtue of being able to spread that money into the future. And San Francisco also picked up some extra contractual control, 2 more years of Christian McCaffrey under contract. And when you have a Hall of Fame caliber player on your team, making sure he's under contract for a longer period of time is always a good thing.
Yeah, especially when he's shown more durability of late than he did certainly in Carolina. I want to ask you again about the Brandon Aiyuk contract and the Justin Jefferson blowing up the ceiling in the wide receiver market. Do you think that Aiyuk is going to look at that contract and try to assimilate toward that number, or does that not have any real bearing on where Brandon Aiyuk is going to land based on his comps being other players?
Well, I actually think that Brandon Aiyuk was in that category, that cluster of receivers. I think that he's above the cluster of receivers that had signed over the past couple months. Guys like Nico Collins, because Nico only had one really productive 1,000-yard year under his belt. I think that Brandon Aiyuk is a better player than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, all those guys were in the mid-30s as far as fully guaranteed money. We're talking $32 million to about $36 million a year. I'd always viewed Brandon Aiyuk as being somebody who was going to push that $50 million. And the previous high water mark was Tyreek Hill at 52.5. And I thought Brandon Aiyuk might want the high 40s, maybe the low 50s. The thing about the Jefferson deal is he came in and we thought, okay, maybe he'll edge out Tyreek Hill's number. Maybe it'll be $55 million fully guaranteed. No, it was $88.7 million fully guaranteed for Justin Jefferson, and that should illustrate just how big of a jump this is, and why people are thinking this might be an outlier. So if Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb do start demanding money that's closer to the Jefferson end of the spectrum than it was to the Tyreek Hill end of the spectrum, that's when you could really see the 49ers and the Cowboys digging in and saying, no, that's an outlier. We don't want to go that far. So to me, right now, the potential recipe for a long standoff is there more than it ever has been, just because of this new deal that's come in. And of course, the receivers are going to want to try to test their luck, at least for a little while before training camp, to see how close the Cowboys and the 49ers are going to come to awarding a contract close to the Justin Jefferson deal.
Okay, that's really interesting. David Lombardi, The Athletic, on his way home from Niners camp, day one, mandatory camp. Christian McCaffrey, new deal. Brandon Aiyuk officially holding out. David, did the 49ers make a mistake by not getting this done prior to Justin Jefferson?
I don't think that's a really fair question to ask, because it's not up to the 49ers unilaterally to get a deal done. It's up to Brandon Ayuk's camp to get a deal done just as much as it is the 49ers. You need two signatures on these things. You need the 49ers signature and you need Brandon Ayuk's signature. And I see no reason for Brandon Aiyuk to have been incentivized to sign a deal before Justin Jefferson, given the buzz around league circles that Justin Jefferson was going to set a new high watermark. So the 49ers could have been trying to get something done, but Brandon Aiyuk and his agent could have just been sitting back and saying, no, wait, we won't sign yet. Let's just wait to see what Justin Jefferson gets. Then we can really talk in earnest. Where they could have set a really high price to just something that the 49ers obviously wouldn't, acquiesce to that early on. So there's so much talk about the 49ers. Should they have gotten something done sooner? Well, everybody would have liked to have gotten something done sooner outside of Brandon Ayuk's camp, right? Because Justin Jefferson has just dangled a tantalizing possibility out for these receivers with how big that contract is. So it has to be a two-way effort, and to get one of these deals done. And obviously, we haven't seen both parties even want to sign on the dotted line at this point. So I just don't think that the premise of that question really encapsulates the situation that we're dealing with here.
Okay, but you sound like you have newfound doubt potentially that this gets done.
No, I think that it will take. I think that we've set ourselves up for a more prolonged standoff here, because it's more likely that two sides will dig into opposite corners. Now, deadline pressure has always won out in these situations, right? Deadline pressure of the either training camp, that the team would like the player there by training camp, so sometimes they'll budge. Maybe the 49ers will budge more in this situation because they've seen over the past 2 years that these contract negotiations with Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa running up and into training camp, and then in the case of Bosa through training camp, that's been a little damaging to the 49ers. And then there's the deadline pressure of the regular season, and that's more of a deadline on Brandon Aiyuk as well, because then he would start to have to he would start forfeiting money moving into the regular season. So I just think that the chances of something getting done really quickly, sooner rather than later, took a blow, because it's, what happened yesterday is a polarizing event. It's a huge amount of money for the top paid receiver in the game. And of course, receivers who are looking for money are going to gravitate toward that precedent, and they're going to want the teams to accept that precedent as well. And the teams are in no way incentivized to accept that precedent until they actually have to. So you just have two opposing camps right now, but eventually a deal will get done, because both parties eventually will want it to get done. Both parties are incentivized for that to happen. The deadline just isn't here yet.
And where would you put that deadline as far as Aiyuk being able to sign and come in and be able to contribute realistically in week one?
Well, Nick Bosa signed, 2 or 3 days before week one last. So the deadline is the deadline, and that's week one. That's when paychecks would stop coming to Brandon Aiyuk if he hasn't signed and he hasn't reported yet. So he's due $14.1 million this year, but that money is not going to flow unless he reports. And if he signs a new deal, then the money from the new deal would start flowing in. So that would be, for all intents and purposes, a financial deadline. But like I said, the 49ers might be incentivized to sweeten the pot to get him in a little bit sooner if they're in a win-now situation right now, right? So that they want to get all distractions off their plate. And how much is it worth it for them to have Brandon Aiyuk come in early? Will sweetening the pot by a couple $1 million do the trick? I don't know. I don't think they're anywhere near that kind of point yet, obviously, given yesterday's news. So we'll have to just sit back, wait and see where they're at once this gets closer to that deadline.
David Lombardi, The Athletic, on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. David, let's talk about Deebo Samuel for a second. We're now just widely under the assumption that Brandon Aiyuk at some point will get paid, and then they will move on from Deebo Samuel after this coming year. Do you see it that way? What are the different possibilities for how it plays out with Deebo?
Well, Deebo is under contract for 2 more seasons, and the 49ers just drafted Ricky Pearsall. So that's a receiver on a rookie deal. Now, we have to wait to see how good Ricky Pearsall is. I'll tell you that he's looked really good in practice so far, but that's one thing, and actual games will be another thing. So the 49ers are going to be collecting that intelligence as time goes by. The one thing that nobody knows for sure is how big the cap is going to be in 2025, 2026, and onward. You can make an educated guess, an educated projection. The 49ers' guesses right now, I'll tell you, with all certainty, is that it's going to be going up. That's why they're pushing a lot of this money into the future. They're surfing that wave. And so far, that strategy has worked really well for them. So when you look into the future, you look at what the cap might be in the future, or you project your ballpark amount. You project your future expenditures, especially the ones that you're going to have to make, like Brock Purdy. That's going to be a massive one that the 49ers have to make. And then you look to see, okay, what else can the team fit around those really key A-list expenditures, and yet still fit it underneath the salary cap. If they pay Brandon Aiyuk, that's going to take up another chunk of money. They obviously have another receiver in Ricky Pearsall, who's going to be on a rookie contract, so that's not going to cost a lot. But once Purdy's in the equation, and you have to see, well, how much would be left over for a player like Deebo Samuel? Would you even be able to extend him? And the answer to that probably is no, when you just look at the salary cap situation of the 49ers and how it is crowding up. But I think a more nuanced, interesting question within that is, can you keep him for both of the final 2 years of his contract, or will you have to resort to getting cap savings after the 2024 season? I will tell you that right now the 49ers are really happy and financially capable of having their cake and eating it too for 2024, and that means that they have Aiyuk under contract, Samuel under contract, and Pearsall under contract. So they're pushing all the chips into the middle of the table for this season, and the more the merrier as far as weapons for Brock Purdy, and then we'll see what happens moving forward into 2025.
So you don't think that they would do something for Deebo like they did for Christian McCaffrey and take a portion of what he might get next year and guarantee that either this year or next year in order to appease him and maybe offset some ill feeling in the wide receiver room?
I don't know how much ill feeling there is right now. I don't think Deebo has indicated that there is ill feeling on his part. He's shown up to OTAs. He's competing, and I think if they do something like that, then they might look at that next year so that Deebo doesn't have to go into lame duck season. So hypothetically speaking, if Deebo Samuel has an awesome year, I think that you're not in the business of letting good players go, especially all-pro type of players go. And he was an all-pro type of player in 2021. So if he stays that available and he performs at that kind of level and the 49ers win a Super Bowl or whatever happens this year, I think that you're going to have a long, hard look at extending Deebo Samuel, regardless of, what else is going on around him, because you don't want to let a good player out of the building, and you'll find a way to make it work. And yes, one of the ways that you could potentially make it work is to do what you just did with Christian McCaffrey, except on a different scale, because Deebo Samuel is classified as a receiver. But the good thing about where the 49ers are right now is that they have the options to look at everything, and they don't have to cross a bridge at this moment. They still have him under contract for 2 years. Brandon Aiyuk, theoretically, they don't have to do anything right now. They still have him under contract for this year. Would he be happy playing on the fifth-year option? I don't think so, but that's why the teams in the NFL, the CBA, hasn't set up so the teams really hold the cards here at the end of the day. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds, but I do know that the 49ers have several options or forks in the road at their disposal, and we'll find out which fork they take in all these situations over the course of the next couple of years.
David, the cap savings that they just got with this new McCaffrey deal, they might get some with Aiyuk if he gets a deal. The Logan Thomas type news was interesting. Could there be more of that with this newfound money, or does it get pushed to next year for Brock Purdy, do you think?
Last year, think of it as a zero-interest loan. I think a lot of people are afraid of dead money, and then they'll say, oh, that bill's going to be coming due. Any money that you pay a player, that's going to hit the cap at some point. So the bills always have a due date in the NFL. You look at it relative to the salary cap, though. If the salary cap is going to continue rising, then every dollar that you spend on Christian McCaffrey in 2026 is going to be a smaller percentage of the salary cap than it is in 2024. So, I mean, it just makes sense for the 49ers to maneuver financially in that way because they're essentially is betting on the salary cap continuing to increase. So I think that we can expect the 49ers to continue operating this way. The one key is you just can't have too many expenditures acutely, which I mean, you can't have too many expenditures in one calendar cycle because then all of a sudden you'll overflow over the cap and there aren't enough restructures that you can make to find your way underneath it, and that's when you have to start cutting players. So I think other teams who have kind of followed the same strategy as the 49ers, like the Saints, they haven't done it as deftly. The Rams, they haven't done it as deftly, and the Rams, I know they had a bunch of trades, and they've hit a point where they had to start cutting players left and right to get under the salary cap, and it obviously hurt their team in the short run. I think what the 49ers are doing is they're trying to be a little bit more preemptive about stuff. So look at the Eric Armstead situation. They went to him and they said, you're not, your injuries have made you an inefficient proposition at $18 million a year. How about 6? Eric Armstead said, no, somebody else is worth, it says that I'm worth $14 million a year. That was the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the 49ers said, okay, fine, we're not willing to raise the price up to 14. And they let him walk. And they found a more cost-efficient way to do business at the defensive tackle position. Those kind of moves, if they stay, if they keep guys at efficient numbers, those kind of moves allow the 49ers sink to not overflow on a year-in, year-out basis, and they can continue doing this kind of stuff indefinitely. That's at least their hope financially, so they can fit all these star players onto their books.
David, really good stuff, really interesting, a lot going on this week, so we appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. You have a great day.